very much. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. So this is a first for me in a number of senses. I have never been on a stage like this before, so bear with me. It's a very intimate setting. It's wonderful, actually, when you have the privilege of standing here, being able to see all of you. So, we have had a mindfulness session. I've just heard from Maud that you are super aware, you are super present, you are in the moment, you are feeling everything, which I don't know if that's an advantage or a disadvantage for me. And you've heard a great deal about agility just now as well. So let's kick off with a little exercise in agility. Does anybody recognize this? Oh, fantastic. Shout. Yes. Michelangelo. Sistine Chapel, very nice. And? The creation of Adam. Excellent. Why am I putting that up there? Well, spark of life. God connects with Adam, creates life. There's a lot of significance in this painting. To my mind, it's one of the most successful exercises in communication in human history. Do you know how long it's been around? Over 600 years. When did it go viral? I was talking to my colleagues about this. I think it went viral sort of in the late 20th century. Because so many people visit, millions of people go to the Sistine Chapel to see this. And you can spend hours there and look at that extraordinary work of art. But the reason I put it up there is because I was thinking of how I could connect what I'm going to tell you about today with the theme of this conference, which I think is a really important one. And we were just hearing from the previous speaker about whether there is change, whether there is a lack of change. Michelangelo changed in the course of painting this. He was actually originally a sculptor. And so he wasn't big in painting. You wouldn't have known subsequently. Now, when we think about sparks and change, we have to think about ourselves. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. What's most important to me in terms of sparks? And it's related to who I am and my life. So it's quite personal. What I showed you with Michelangelo earlier was very personal. It's very people-centered. You know, we use that word a lot, people-centered. Well, that painting is super people-centered. It's two touching each other. So, I would say education is a really important spark for me. I have 3 children beyond my own education. They are 9, 7, and 2 years old. And I hope and count that education will spark creativity, imagination, innovation, many things that we talk about in conferences like this. And I hope it will allow them to be able to fulfill themselves as much as they possibly can. Another spark for me is my job. It's wonderful to be able to come to places like this and be paid for the privilege. So part of my job is to come and speak at events of this type. But it's also to tell you about one of the things that I spent a lot of time in the last few years, together with a number of colleagues who joined me today, in creating something special. But for me, it's really important to be able to channel that desire for creativity, to do something new and to do something different in my job. But as I've got 3 children, and I like working, I have to be very mindful of work-life balance. If I'm doing too much work, my personal life will suffer. And vice versa, that can happen as well. So striking that balance between those two is a complicating thing. There's a great joy that I get from my connection with nature. If I jump into a lake, that feeling you get in your body, you see the ripples in the water. I don't know how many of you have been in Paris in the last few weeks, maybe many of you. How many of you saw lightning in the sky? Well, I saw a lot of lightning. There have been a lot of storms in this city. It's exciting when you suddenly see the rain coming down in that way. You know, if you're in the middle of it, of course you're going to get soaked. But there's an energy and there is a literal spark. That lightning connects you with nature, and you also see that humility that is needed for human beings. Happiness, a sense of happiness, life satisfaction. That's super important for me in my life. And that connects with many other things. Probably, though, the number one is health. The health of my family, the health of my children, the health of my wife, my own health. I'm 49 going on 50. I have to start looking after myself. So I try and cycle to work every day. I try and eat more healthily. My dad's 88. He was 88 yesterday, and he's going strong. He's pretty healthy. That's really important. It's important for me. And in what I've just said, that's personal. But how personal and unique am I? I'm sure that many of the things that I've attached importance to just now are things that you equally could attach importance to. Now, I said my job was important. I work for an organisation called the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. Now, that is a mouthful. Most people will not remember that. You may have known it before, in which case you might. So, I'd rather you remembered, if you wish, that we're about better policies for better lives. So, the reason that we exist is to try and develop those good policies in order to be able to impact on the lives of ordinary citizens. People who vote, people who pay tax, normal people. Very important element in all of this, and we got this initiative going many years ago, but it's really become relevant now, is in doing that, you need to combine elements, human elements. Now, if anybody was in doubt, I think the last few years have made us realize how few people act very rationally. And you know that economics has been based for some time on the idea that people operate in a rational way. And the organisation I'm part of was very connected to that way of looking at things. If you're interested in trying to promote well-being for citizens, human beings, we are very human. We are not rational. So I'm going to test that. How many of you have eaten too much recently? Hands up. How many of you smoke? How many of you have your drink? Oh, dearie me. Now, of course, we know many of those things are things we shouldn't do. We shouldn't overeat, we shouldn't smoke, we shouldn't drink. And yet, all of these things provide pleasure. They make us who we are. We're not rational actors. We are human beings. So we have to somehow combine two sides of the brain, the emotional and the reason and reasonable, or the head and the heart, whichever way you like to look at it. And I think that's a real challenge that we all have. So when we're talking about how to spark a change, I think combining those two elements may be one of the most critical things that we have. And it's a little bit like the synapses in the brain. So you know that when people are depressed, there isn't that connection. The synapses don't work. In our case, if the policies don't get to the lives, we have a problem. A problem, Houston, as someone said just now. And that's what sparked an initiative that we took a few years ago to create an instrument that would allow any one of you, or me, in fact anybody with a connection to the internet and with the ability to express themselves in now 7 languages, to play and through that playing measure their well-being. In doing that, we are also able to capture what I and you think is most important in life. So it's a dual function. We built this concept and this index around a number of important elements in our lives. Now, this is not the final word, but this was a start, and it wasn't just any start. We do things reasonably seriously at the OECD, and it was based on a number of years of work and research in terms of areas that we felt that we also had a capacity to be able to measure and to provide citizens with elements on. Now, the index is not the OECD's, it's yours. And to illustrate this, I'm actually going to compose my index. But let me begin by explaining. We have a number of countries. This is a little bit like a Formula One car race at the beginning. So you see all of the flowers are lined up, and they represent countries. So there is no ranking at this point. Each flower is composed of 11 petals. The symbolism here is important. It's a flower. It can blossom. It can grow. And you heard earlier about the things that are important in my life. So let me begin by completing my index. You can do this. There's the link. Bear with me a little bit, listen to me a little bit longer, and then after that I really want you to get on there and with all of your contacts as well. But let me say what's important to me. I express it. What happens then through this instrument? I'm starting to play some music. Countries line up according to what's most important to me. Sorry, I shouldn't be touching on that. So, in my case, a little bit about me. From the accent you can probably tell, I was born in the United Kingdom. My mother was Spanish. I live in France. And according to this, I should probably be in the United States. But it depends on how you look at things. Anyway, I've only filled half the index so far. Is that all the story? Let's take a look. Let's complete the other elements. What happens then? Oh, it may no longer be the United States that is my preferred destination. If that's how I look at life. I just want to travel anywhere, right? So beauty's in the eye of the beholder here. What can this tell us and how can this help us? Well, I'm a curious person. We're all curious people, human beings. We want to know why. And you're probably sitting there going, well, why is Norway top? And where is France? Well, it's in the middle. It's a little bit lower than the UK, a little bit higher than Spain, so for someone like me, it's probably an appropriate place to be. But why are the Norwegians doing so well? Well, through the index, you don't just find out, say, where a country is positioned according to what's most important to you, but why are they where they are? What are the policies, going back to the policies and the lives, what are the policies that they put in place? What education policies have they put in place? What health policies have they put in place? Why is it that people there are ranking very highly in their well-being? So you can dive in and find out quite a lot about that country. We don't know a lot about many places, and this allows you to do so in a very easy and accessible way. But I also said I'm really interested in happiness. Well, what about finding a little bit more about what that is in life satisfaction? Through the index, you can also enter into each one of those 11 issues in more detail, not just by country, but by issue itself. So you're satisfying this human curiosity of finding out why the Norwegians do so well. I could say, well, here I am, based in France, I may not be moving, so my read of this is, I would quite like to see what France can do to be more like Norway, or whichever country it may be, so that they can learn, and we all learn from each other, and that's a little bit the recipe that we have. But this can help you also overcome prejudices. Now, Australians, let me see. I think Australians, well, they spend a lot of time on the beach and on surfboards. You know, they've got lots of sunshine down there, great beaches, etc. There's the odd shark, it's true. I didn't know that Australians actually spend most time at work, probably out of any OECD country. Their biggest concern, what they've been telling us through the index over the last few years, their biggest concern in life is work-life balance. So this index can allow you also to learn things that you didn't know, or to get over certain stereotypes that you may have. Now, I said that we're curious, we're also social animals, and we've become a lot more social since social media came along. I'm sure many of you are active in the course of this session, and I would like you to become active after I finish in completing your indexes, but to do that, you need to give a little bit of information. So here's my information. Now, I was born in the United Kingdom, but where am I from now? I'm from France. That's where I'm living. I'm male, and I'm aged anywhere between 45 and 54. I told you I'm 49, going on 50. So having completed that index, I can now share it with anyone I would like in the world, my network. In doing that, I am providing the first source of big data for the OECD, and for you, because in real time, guess what? I've just appeared. That's me with a beard, I'm not wearing the right top. And as I'm completing my index, so somebody in Canada, somebody in Bolivia or Brazil is completing theirs. So far, 11 million people have visited this initiative, this platform, from all over the world. And that's fascinating, because the data we have at the moment covers 40 countries in the world. But people are interested in the issue, they're interested in the subject, they're interested in well-being, and I think they're also quite interested in being actors themselves. Not in being told things, but in actively generating things themselves. So, what have we learned so far? Some of you may have heard the expression health, wealth, and happiness. So what would people like to be or have at a global level? They would like to be healthy, happy, and wise. And those three things certainly resonate with me. The interesting thing here is when you look at some of those other aspects of well-being, where do those material elements that theoretically we think are so important in life lie? What are people telling us? Where is the money coming in? Number 9 out of 11. It's not that it's not important, but in relative terms, where is it coming? This is at a global level. The one I struggle with is civic engagement at the bottom, because when people complete their index, they are engaging civically. I think the difficulty is that they're not recognizing it in that way, so there may be some lessons there in terms of how you do things. But those material living conditions, the things that theoretically say, oh, it's all about the money, the most important thing in life is the material stuff. Well, this is the feedback that is being got. So don't believe everything people tell you sometimes. How about here in France? Que pensent les Français? Firstly, there are a few more women than men who participate in this exercise in France. Secondly, 15 to 25-year-olds are really into it. So those of you who are 25 and over, please get active, because you have as legitimate a voice as anybody else, but you can see that on the age range. I think it's great if young people are getting involved, because they're going to be around for a while. But I am not ageist. And what's most important to French people? Health, education, life satisfaction. But housing in France, housing is higher than on the global average. Interesting. Plus ça change, plus ça reste la même chose? Not necessarily. Top and bottom, yes. So we began this initiative in 2012 de facto, when people started giving us feedback. Yes, health has remained number 1, and civic engagement is bottom. But look at the journey that jobs went on. From being relatively not so important in 2012, to a lot more important in 2014, to coming back down again. And there have been some more permanent movements as well. All of that to say that our choices and our preference, they're not fixed in time. As human beings, we evolve and we change. Again, that's a really important lesson for us to capture. We don't suddenly, mark a course and say, right, that's it for the next 10, 15 years. We have to be agile in that sense. and recognize that people's concerns, the things that are most important to them, they can evolve and oscillate over time. The other thing is, it's really interesting to find out what different people in different parts of the world think too. So, for example, people in Brazil, look at where safety is in Brazil. It's coming in number 3. And they don't have happiness as number 1. You know, we may have preconceptions about the Brazilians always dancing and partying, etc. So it's a very interesting way to also discover what people think in different places. Do we all think differently? Are there similarities? Those patterns that we can see. That's also what makes us humans in different places. It's also interesting when you look at the results through gender and through age. Remember the 3 questions that I was asked at the beginning: my age range, my sex, and where I was from. So what happens on gender? You've heard that expression, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Well, is that true? According to the findings that we have, not really. Men and women, we have broadly similar preferences in terms of well-being. Men give a little bit more importance to income, and women give a bit more importance to community and work-life balance. And what about when you're older and when you're younger? Well, younger people are a bit more into happiness and the money, and older people, as you would expect, health, civic engagement, and the environment. People vote more when they're older as well, you know, so the civic engagement element is there. Super interesting, because with an initiative of this type, an organisation like the OECD manages to connect into some very, very mainstream big places. Now, I'm a big, big football fan. This was one of the best days of my life. I met a gentleman called Pelé. He's one of my childhood heroes. My knees went weak. Only 2 times in my life my knees went weak. When I gave a speech at my wedding, and secondly, when I met Pelé. And I've had the privilege of meeting some very famous people. But getting into places like this is super important, because this is where people are. You know it now. How many millions of you are going to watch France against Denmark in a while, or you're dreaming, and everybody around the world is dreaming. The Panamanians scored a goal against England, and they were, you know, over the moon. It was fantastic. So these are things that really drive human emotion and human beings. And you can see the intergenerational elements there as well. But we're also really into food and nutrition. So where did we take this index? We took it to the World Expo in Milan in 2015. And we generated an index using food to connect with people, go to where people are and what people care about. And we got into some great places. The OECD had never been in Paris Match. C'est pas sérieux, Paris Match. Mais tout le monde le dit. Bild, front page of Bild, online and on paper for 2 days. Bild is a really popular newspaper in Germany. We get into gaming, and we also get nominated for a Webby. No one in the OECD knew what a Webby award was. So there was I saying, look, this is data visualization, this is the Oscars of data visualization. It's fantastic, and people are looking at me going, So I think you guys and girls know this. Now, I'm coming to the end, under pressure on the time. We're talking about the company of the future. Now, I've talked about human beings, I've talked about countries. What about companies? Well, to my mind, companies are eminently human because they're set up in order to achieve some purpose. They're composed of human beings. People who work for them, their clients, people they service, etc. So I am positing to you, how about if we were to imagine a change whereby the company of today and the company of tomorrow could use a structure, a paradigm of this type, of the value creation of well-being, in order to be able to organise and also project itself into the future. And I think that there is a lot of mileage in that. Not only do I think there's mileage in it, but we have actually been able to work together with a company in order to bring these elements together. The company is a French headquartered company called Sodexo. And by the way, a little secret, we don't have a lot of money at the OECD. We needed some material well-being. We needed some money to keep this initiative going once we got it going, and Sodexo helped us with that. But more importantly, look at the key elements of the mission that they have in terms of quality of life services. So what we could see was a real world actor getting into this game. They've got 500,000 people who work for them all over the world, and God knows how many clients. So you can see there that connection. It's a real proposition. This isn't a theoretical thing. It's something that people are already out there getting on and doing. And we think that there is definitely a virtuous circle here. When companies invest in well-being, they get their employee engagement, and the results follow. The performance that you can see in spaces like this. So this is my pitch in terms of sparking change, companies of the future, how we might evolve. And I will leave you with this final thought. Merci beaucoup.